This interview is brought to you in association with Rabobank.
As required by the Commodities Levies Act, the Foundation for Arable Research has to go to cropping farmers every 6 years and ask them to vote in a referendum. It's how growers get to have their say regarding the industry good activity that FAR carries out on their behalf. Nick Pyke is FAR's Chief Executive and he joins me now. Nick, welcome.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, and before we begin, congratulations on your recognition in the Queen's Birthday Honours this year, and also your longtime FAR associate, Dr Phil Ralston, also honoured as a world-class New Zealander for 2017. So FAR must be doing something right.
Yes, well, both those honours coming to one organisation in the space of about a month or so was quite amazing and really well recognised, I think, by our industry that we're trying to do some things to help them.
Now, referendum. It seems like only a heartbeat since I last spoke to you 6 years ago. What's your challenge here? Is it just getting farmers out to vote, or do you feel you've got a fight on your hands to stay up?
Well, I'd like to think that we've been delivering the things that the farmers want over the last 6 years, and certainly we have a lot of contact with them. So hopefully for most farmers they can look back at what we've done over the last 6 years and say there is something there that ticks a box for me on progress, profit, and more sustainability within their farm. So I hope that's not the case, and certainly, a more important thing to us is to get them out to vote, because irrespective of how they vote, at least they've had a chance to say that they're part of our organisation going forward over the next 6 years.
How many are there out there?
We have about 3,000 farmers that are growing crops, but there's a huge range in the scale that they grow, obviously, so there's a few of them that grow crops as their sole income. Most of them have some animals as part of that, and some of them have a few crops as part of their animal farming practices.
Okay. So a yes vote for growers, what will that mean for them and for the organisation?
So a yes vote from the growers will mean that we can carry on for the next 6 years delivering information that's going to help them on their farms, whether it's related to the environmental constraints that are facing them, or whether it's related to improving their productivity, profitability, or hopefully it's related to trying to find some new farming options, systems that are going to deliver higher value to them in the future.
You're not asking for any more money?
No, we're not asking for any more money from the farmers at all. The percentage that we take will remain exactly the same as it is currently. That can change during the next 6 years, so if for some reason arable grew hugely and there was a huge flush of funds, we could reduce the levy. If there was something that came along that required us to invest more, say a biosecurity incursion that we needed a lot of research done on, then we could increase it to cover those sorts of things. But at this stage, there's no intention to change it.
Okay. Now let's talk about growth, because FAR's actually got a pretty ambitious plan for this sector. And if I were to read it word for word, it's make cropping the highest returning and most sustainable broadacre land use for New Zealand farmers. That would imply that there would be some growth in the sector. Are you optimistic?
Yes, we are optimistic for a couple of reasons, or a number of reasons probably. Firstly, we recognise that we've got some very key strengths amongst our cropping farmers in New Zealand. The first one is that we've got soil, and there aren't that many places in the world that have the quality of soil that we have in New Zealand that's not being degraded. The second one is that in many places of the country we have adequate water, and again, if you look around the world, that's becoming a more and more critical resource.
Sure is.
And the third reason is our farmers are very, very good. And the last one is generally, most seasons, somewhere in the country we have very good weather, climate conditions. Sometimes we have the odd hiccup, but generally our climate's favourable for growing a wide range of things. So the challenge for us going forward is to try and work out exactly what those things should be that are going to be most profitable for our farmers.
At the moment, what's the balance across FAR between food and feed?
Yes, so most of the products that are produced on cropping farms go into the animal industry at some point. So we produce seed which goes into the grass seed and pastoral industry as grass seeds or brassica seeds or what have you. We also produce quite a lot of grain that goes into feeding livestock, whether it's dairy industry or more intensive livestock industries. We do produce some grains that go into the milling industry, but we don't produce all the grain that New Zealand needs to go into the milling industry. We could certainly produce a lot more, but problems relate to where the population is in relation to where the grain production is. So most of the grain production being in the South Island and most of the requirement for making bread in the North Island.
If you look at the food mega trends that exist across the world at the moment, there's probably nothing hotter than more plant-based foods, people call it. So we're talking about people making an informed decision about choosing to consume a greater proportion of their diet from plants. Some of that might be to replace a meat product or a dairy product. Some of it might be a standalone. What role for FAR in helping, I guess, the sector look across that as an opportunity, which must be huge?
Yes, it is a huge area of potential for us. It's also a huge challenge. It's a very fast-moving space internationally, so plant-based proteins, meat lookalikes, and was almost unheard of 6 years ago, and now we have those products such as the Impossible Burger on the market or sun-fed chicken here in New Zealand. So we need to be very mindful of that, and we have a program which is looking at what these future foods might be and what we can do here in New Zealand to supply either proteins or nutritional beverages or even high-value oils that will be part of the food trends of the future. Mm-hmm. The real challenge, I think, is how do we make that specific to New Zealand, and how do we capture the unique factors we have in New Zealand, because we have animals and we have plants. Most of these trends internationally are looking at plant-based foods solely, instead of looking and saying, how can we, as New Zealand, develop sustainable, high-value products that are based on both plant and potentially animal products.
Yeah, well, you need a diversified diet with a diversified landscape and diversified systems, I suppose.
That's correct, yeah. And I mean, our farming system's a real challenge going forward as well. I think we've really got to look carefully at the diversification of it, and cropping, I think, will play a really critical part of that. One of the challenges we have is that crops fit into a farm. They're not necessarily the sole farming system. So instead of having a dairy farm, we'll have a farm which happens to have some crops and some dairy on it going forward. And I think those are challenges, particularly for our industry, that we need to work through.
What other challenges? Biosecurity is one that's permanently there.
Yes, biosecurity is definitely there, and in the last 3 years we've had more than our share of issues there. We've had 4 incursions that we've had to work our way through.
Yep.
We're not signed up to the GIA yet as an industry, and that's one of the things we're working on collectively with Federated Farmers and New Zealand Grain and Seed Trade and others, and that'll be critical to get that in place over the next little while, because although we're not signed up, we've operated within the constraints of the GIA type system and with some of those incursions, and it works. We can bring skills and knowledge, and MPI can bring their skills and knowledge, and the two together are likely to get a better outcome. So that's going to be an ongoing challenge. The incursions we've got now on our plate aren't going to go away for another couple of years, so we've got things to work through in relation to those. Hopefully we don't see any more, but we've got to be well set up for that in the future. I think the other challenges are going to be around water and nutrients, which is already there, and we've got to work through those. But going forward, management of our soils, looking after soil quality, pesticides and developing new pesticide solutions, whether they're biologicals or whether they're safer agrochemicals, those sorts of things are all going to be right there in front of us over the next 6 years.
Okay, well, what about a little bit further afield? You've got substantial links into Australia in particular. How international has this industry become, and how international is FAR becoming in terms of its linkages? Yes,
we do have links into Australia. We have part of our business within Australia, and that's really critical for us. The investment in cropping in New Zealand in research and extension is not large. So by linking into Australia, we hopefully will leverage off the research programs that are going on there. And some of those are starting to come to fruition really well now. So we're linked into a program in Australia called Hyper-Yielding Wheats, which links directly into the work we're doing here on 20 tonnes by 2020. The herbicide resistance issues are growing very rapidly within New Zealand, and we link very closely now to some of the work that's going on herbicide resistance in Australia. So our links to Australia are really critical for us going forward. But we've got to look wider than that, and we still have good links in the UK, and we continue to try and develop and forge those and look at options, particularly around genetic material coming out of the UK. And more recently, we're starting to look at links with South America, and there's an international herbage seed conference in South America later this year, which a number of our team are going to try and look at how we improve those links. We've also got links in North America with the herbage seed research that's going on there, and those are absolutely critical because seed research internationally is not a large area of work, and we need to leverage off what's going on internationally.
How long does it take for the levy process to play out? When will you have your deciding vote?
So the deciding vote is on the 23rd of August. That's when it closes off, and we'll know very shortly after the close-off time on the 23rd.
Well, we wish you the very best of luck, and we look forward to carrying the stories from the sector on rural delivery. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
This interview is brought to you in association with Rabobank.